The first boat alongside carried quarantine men in oilskins with cloths. They climbed the Jacob's ladder and paused at the top rail, taking in gray decks, August haze, and the Hamburg liner at anchor, with her engines cold. A yellow flag showed at the mast. Families pressed to the bulwarks, waiting. The ship was the Moravia of the Hamburg America line. She had sailed from Hamburg on August 16, 1892, with hundreds of steerage passengers and a clean bill of health. By New York, 22 were dead and others ill. The doctor in the boarding party wiped sweat from his neck. "Steerage first," he said. They advanced with lanterns held high. The air in the forward spaces had the sting of chloride and something worse, sour and unmistakable. A woman bent over a child on a bunk, murmuring in Russian. Another rocked with empty arms. The quarantine doctor pressed his palm to a boy's forehead. "He's going." Buckets stood along the passage where carbolic had been thrown, and the deck still shone wet. The ship's surgeon followed, explaining what was done at sea. A case the second day out, another before the first Sunday, then bunk to bunk. The dead were sewn in canvas and buried at sea. "We kept a register," he said, "names as we could get them." Above, the tug that had put the boarding party on circled in the haze. Off Staten Island, a line of hulls marked the quarantine ground: Rugia, Scandia, Normannia, and now Moravia, each holding between Fear and the open gate. Harbor police set a cordon. No one went ashore. No one came aboard except health officers. When a lighter drew too close, a patrol boat forced her off with a loud hailer. The wind shifted, bringing coal smoke and bilge. From another ship astern, a bell tolled. Hatches opened, hose ran to sluice the decks. The sick were carried up into air and laid under awnings rigged from canvas and rope. The Hamburg agent watched the pale shore and the small craft holding off. The captain signed the health department's orders: anchor off the Narrows, land no passengers, strip bedding, lock baggage for fumigation. Coal dust drifted in the lamps. The cook boiled broth. The watch could only count time. At sunset, the haze turned the bay the color of brass. Mothers lifted children to see the lights on shore. Men peered through the rigging at the low quarantine islands. Rumor moved faster than the tide. Ashore they would be stripped, bathed with hose, clothing burned, hair cut, names taken wrong, families separated. Some prayed to be taken, others begged to be left aboard. Calls for water, and the surgeon mixed with gulls and the slap of tide against iron. Night brought a different fear. A lantern had blown on another ship and thrown sparks. The story grew until many aboard feared a spark could set canvas alight. The crew stood with buckets while the quarantine men worked through the dark. A small fan pump sent a draft of cool air below. The ship creaked on her chain. From the forecastle, a low hymn rose. The health officer turned a page and wrote the hour beside a name. At dawn, the boarding boat returned with barrels of disinfectant and coils of hose. A second brought blankets and a canvas screen for a deck ward. The doctor conferred with the ship's surgeon. The worst must be removed to Swinburne Island. The exposed would wait out incubation aboard. The captain protested that families would be broken. The doctor tapped the orders. "We separate the living to keep them so." When a panicked group rushed the gangway, sailors hauled it up. The Hamburg agent raised both hands and begged them back. The harbor police cut a circle around the liner with a plume of spray to warn off small craft hovering out of range. By midday, the first transfer began. Launches from the quarantine station edged alongside, their crews masked. Mothers clutched children while a clerk pinned numbered tags to shawls and coats. A father tried to hand his baby to his wife and was forced back, the baby going with her while he stayed. The sound that followed had no language. A young priest with a tin cross moved among them, writing names. The launches took the sick. Faces turned toward the skyline. The crew cleared space near the mainmast and fed more canvas through the fumigators. The Moravia's whistle sounded once, long and low, not as a signal, but as a breath let out. In the heat, laborers erected a portable disinfecting chamber on a lighter off the quarter. Steerage baggage went over the side for steaming and dip. Officers nailed shut crates with the dead's effects. A health inspector read the president's proclamation requiring detention for ships from infected ports. Some stared at the water, measuring it. The police warned by megaphone that any boat approaching would be seized. A woman fainted and was moved to shade. Another begged to send a note to a husband in Brooklyn. The agent promised to try and pocketed it. The second night was the hardest. The light on the quarantine pier swept the anchorage like a metronome. On Moravia, coughs, prayers, and boot thuds slowed with the tide. A boy named Abram counted bubbles in a lantern because they did not sway when the deck rolled. The surgeon closed a man's eyes and wrote the name the wife said, underlining it twice. Far off, the Staten Island ferry's whistle sounded thin. Morning broke with a seam of storm hiding New Jersey. Rain washed the decks and did a crew's work. The boarding party marked who had fever and who did not, counted the hours since the last death, and weighed them against other ships. More transfers went to the islands. Men strong a week earlier sat on crates, catching air. When the launches pulled away, hands reached and failed to touch. The roar of rain on canvas hid women calling to each other across the strip of water. Through it all, Moravia did not move. Her chain held her to the quarantine ground. Her decks smelled of coal and medicine. Her rails were polished by hands. Rumor seeped aboard. Police beating back a crowd on Fire Island when people objected to sick passengers from another liner. The governor buying a hotel for quarantine. The city ready to close rather than let sickness in. On deck, those were only weather. What mattered was the next hour. Water, broth, a place to lay fever down. On the fourth day, the doctor gathered the officers and spoke plainly. There were no new deaths overnight. Those with cramps were holding. Those exposed showed no signs. If the tally held for a full incubation, the remainder could go ashore when ordered. The captain looked forward along his decks as if seeing them for the first time. A child laughed at a gull slipping the wind. Another answered from across the awning, and heads turned because no one could remember laughter since the ship stopped in the lower bay. In time, after more transfers, more fumigation, more lists made and checked, the yellow flag came down. Harbor tugs nudged the liner toward the channel, and her engines turned over, slow, then steady. The skyline cleared of haze. Names were read for landing, others held. Families divided by the week's orders stood where they could see one another and made promises with their eyes. The ship moved, and the anchorage behind filled with other hulls and flags. Quarantine leaves a tally of hours and a list of names, a count of deaths written in a careful hand, and, for those who lived, a memory of a city held at a distance. Moravia brought fear into the harbor and held it at anchor until the fear wore itself down. The men who climbed aboard first in oilskins left on the last launch with notebooks of numbers and a few lines not medical. A boy counting bubbles, a father watching a boat push off with his child in it, a ship standing still in the tide while the world decided what to do about her. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.